This is a new overview video of the Digi-Gurdy. First thing is, a suitable bag for a Digi-Gurdy, and indeed a nerdy-gurdy, is a 4 to 6 racket badminton or tennis racket bag. This is a 4 racket badminton bag. So we'll open this side and out comes our Gurdy. And then what do we have in here? Well, we have an iPad and optionally a little rechargeable practice amplifier, quite handy. And then in this pocket we have the required leads. What are they? First of all, USB lead angle, this side, which goes in the end of the Gurdy, and then this side standard USB, and then an adapter, often sold as a camera adapter for the iPad with the correct end on it for whatever iPad you happen to own. You have to buy the Apple product, not a cheaper clone, because some of them don't work. And then optionally, what else have we got? I've got a lead. You don't have to use this. It's 3.5mm that end, hang on, and the same the other end, and you can use that to connect the headphone socket or line out to your little practice amp if you aren't using headphones, for example. So that's one option. Finally, a small link cable which will be supplied with the Gurdy. That allows you to power it from an internal battery. We'll come to that later. And then optionally a MIDI master. Yamaha makes something similar as well. This is a MIDI, Bluetooth MIDI transmitter. So you plug it into the MIDI out socket here, which I'll go through, and it transmits MIDI data to your iPad, which then plays the music, and it's very low latency. So that's optional, you don't have to have that. So that covers the hardware. So going around it, what do we see? Well, it's got a crank, clearly, that's good. It has a knob which has been made smaller recently, like on the Nerdy Basics. It's got proper ball bearing race bearings in it, and as you use it, it'll get freer and freer. So it's spinning pretty freely there. S-shaped steel crank. It's quite chunky in thickness. Just because I don't want it to bend in transport or anything like that. Proper bearing here, 8mm thick shaft. So, you know, if you're going to bend this, you'd have to apply quite a bit of force to it, basically. So that's your crank. Now, in a real Gurdy, the strings rub on the wheel, and that's what gives the crank the slight resistance to turning. Otherwise, it would, if the strings are off the wheel, the crank spins freely. So how do we get the resistance? You see there's resistance there to turning. You turn this guitar tuner, and inside here there's like a drum brake from a car, but it's quite weak, and as you turn this it tightens the drum brake, so that just gives you a little bit of friction. This is a standard MIDI output socket. It's also got an input socket on this version. We're concentrating on the output socket. In the 70s, I think the late 70s, MIDI was a standard for synthesizers to send information to each other, to talk to each other. It was like an international agreed standard. That's the old school official plug design, and you would put a cable in there. What we use that for though is, if we don't want to connect this with a cable, a USB cable to, for example, an iPad, you can use a wireless transmitter, which is not supplied, but you can get these online, and that goes in that socket. So you might be asking, why have we got a MIDI-in socket? We've added that because we've got a new piece circuit board design that is there, so in future we could attach, for example, a pedal box with buttons on it, and you could control things on the Gurdy through there. So that's what's there for. It's to make it future proof. At the moment it doesn't do anything. Right. How does it work? Where's the strings? There's no strings. No, there isn't. But you can see there is a circuit board here, and it's got loads of little switches on it, and there are things here like tangents, and they're kind of tangents because when they press the key, instead of pressing a string, they press, you can hear it clicking, they press a little switch. So that's how the computer knows what button you're pressing, what key. Underneath there's a computer. It's about as powerful as one in a regular mobile phone. There's a screen. There's also what's known as the big button. That's a gaming, old school gaming button from like an 80s video game. We'll come to that later. And there's a knob here. Now the purpose of that knob is it sets the point where the buzz comes in. So when you crank slowly, you hear the notes, the open string, trompette and drone, and by adjusting this you can set the speed above which you'll get a buzz. So that sets the sensitivity of the buzz. How many strings has this instrument got? Well, physically none, but it simulates an instrument with 2 melody strings, a trompette and a drone. It could do more, but it just gets more and more complicated to tune all the strings, so a reasonable compromise at the moment is 4. You'll also notice this lid, it's not hinged. These little hinges, if you overstress them, suddenly they'll crack out of the wood and just ruin everything. So what I've got here is a magnet and a magnet, and they're not just glued on, they're like embedded in a 3D print, so they will not break free even on a hot day. And here looks like little bolt heads, they're screwed in to the lid, so again they will not break free even on a hot day. And then that just holds them on. It's a personal hate of mine. The reason the door of my 3D printer is held together with blue tack is because the self-adhesive magnets have non-self-adhesed. They don't stick anymore. So these magnets will not come out. Okay, so it's simple but effective. What about the end here? You've got this USB socket. It's the square type, you see them on the back of printers, and it's just more rugged than the normal USB socket. And then there's this thing here. If you undo these 2 screws, a tube will fall out of here. If you unscrew the end of the tube, you'll find it's actually a commercially available mobile phone power bank, and it's rechargeable through the small port, and you draw power by plugging something into the large port. There's a separate video on this. So the Gurdy supplied without the battery because it's a lithium battery, but you buy your own and you put it in. But you don't have to have that for it to work. Underneath are the inspection hatches. Undo these tiny screws and you've got 3 panels that come off if you need to fiddle around inside, which you shouldn't need to do, but if you did, you can do it. Be careful with this panel. On the underside of this panel is an audio board, which is optional, it's extra. That allows you to use the Gurdy on its own, i.e. not connected to a phone or an iPad or computer. If you just want to turn it on and use a headphone socket, then you need an audio board inside that will generate all the sounds simultaneously. That's where that board is, and I'll quickly show it to you now. Right, if we take a quick look in here, on the back of this panel is this board. On the board, this is optional, remember it's the optional audio board. On this board is a memory card that contains audio sounds of every possible note that could possibly be played on the hurdy-gurdy. So that's what I refer to as the audio board, and that then plugs into there, and that goes to the headphone socket, and then there's another lead here which you don't need to worry about. So what happens when we turn the crank? Well, over here now, this is a recent upgrade. Over here you'll see shaft rotates. This thing is a commercial rotary encoder, and that sends data to the computer on how fast the crank's going round. Basically the computer is hard to see, but it's that thing there, and then you've got some wires to the screen, which is there, and really they're the main features. And you can see there's an internal bearing as well, similar to this one. So I'll put it back together and I'll start to show you how you actually use it. Finally, I need to just point out, you have these things known as the X buttons because they're extra buttons. That's the pause button. These then are all configured, including this one, to do whatever you want. These by default are transpose, up, down, and capo on, off, which I'll show you. This is a blue LED that flashes with each buzz of the crank. And you might think that's a gimmick, but I find it actually quite helpful when I'm trying to get even buzzes. It's just a visual feedback thing. So I plug in the USB cable there. You can see it's angled, which makes it harder to snap it off on something. Then we plug that onto that, and I'm going to plug that end into my iPad there. So the first thing you'll notice, you get the opening logo, then it shows you what software version you've got. That's quite important. If you ever need a software upgrade, it's nice to know what version you've already got. So you can see there we've got an initial start menu. Now I'm going to open on the iPad something called BS16i. There's different views, okay, but you want this view, that view. Now there's a separate video on this, but you can see you've got a library of sounds, and we've selected high D steel melody, and you'll see in the small print there, that's the library. The library refers to the sound fonts. The sound fonts are a file that contains all the possible sounds recorded that could ever be played. So the one we're using now is called this one, version 16. So that's fine, and we work our way along. Every now and then we may give you an upgraded sound font with extra sounds in it. 16's the current one. See, there's a master volume control here, right? Now this comes with some preset tunings for beginners. So if I press 1, load preset, let's see what happens. Sorry. What's 1? Well, we use the keys to navigate the menus. So 1 is there, it's got a 1 above it. It's key number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To reject things in a menu, you tend to press X, top left. To accept, A is A. To accept something in a menu, press top right key. Okay, so let's see what presets we've got. So I'm going to press key number 1. Right, now you see it gives you a list of possible tunings, and these are just 4 basic ones for beginners. So I tend to use D tuning most of the time. You can change this display to kind of French notation, do re mi, or not, but this one sort of shows you both. So I'm going to choose option 3, which is D tuning. Right, now it shows you what your strings are. Your high melody is currently D5, low melody D4, trumpets at D4, drones at D3. Okay, so if we want to accept that, you can accept it or reject it. So let's accept it. So we're going to press A. Right, now it's reminding you what the tunings are all the time. I'm going to back off the resistance on the crank because I'm going to turn it with one hand. There we are. Okay. Right, what else can we do? What do these transpose buttons do? If I press those. Oh, look. So we're going up. Now what does this do? This is the I can't be bothered to crank button because I'm just trying to learn the tunes with my left hand button. So if you press that, right, now you can play with one hand. Okay, right, now people ask, can you tune it down so it sounds like a tenor Gurdy? Well, let's see. Let's go down some more. -3. How far can we go? Well, let's try that. That's pretty low, but we can go lower. Boom, 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 boom. I think that's the maximum there. There we go. So, drone D2. So the answer to that is yes, you can. You also got this capo on, capo off. Sorry, capo off. Okay. Next thing, what do these keys do? Right, press pause. Right, a whole load of menus comes up. So for example, tuning volume, number 3. I'll just go through some of these. Right, volume control, number 4. Now you see I can adjust the volume of every single string independently. That's more useful when you're using the internal soundboard and the headphone socket. When using the iPad, you can just use these sliders, to be honest. But it's a useful feature to have. Okay, and X to go back. What else? Let's go back again. What about other? If I press other, we get another set of menus. Look, screen configuration. So you can have the display altered however you want it. Input output config, what's that? If I press 3, you can see I can select the secondary output. Right, I've pressed that now. So I can have the MIDI out socket enabled. I can have the audio socket enabled, which basically powers up the soundboard I showed you earlier, or you can have both. So at the moment I just want the MIDI out socket. I should say with all these versions this cable coming out is operational all the time, so I don't want the audio board powered up if I'm not using it. So I'm not going to select 2, I'm going to select 1 there, if that makes sense. When it says save to EEPROM, that just means it's saved to memory, so remember it next time. Buzz LED on and off. If you don't like this buzz flashing, you can turn it off. Okay. Right, so let's just keep going back. Right, what about tuning and volume? Hang on, let's go to... Right, now, I won't go into these details, but basically you can set the tuning of every single string individually, or you can go through it in a guided fashion, which try and help you, and you can save it as a custom tuning. So when you go to startup, you can have your own custom tuning saved in the memory. Okay, so just come out again. Right, let's just press some of these and see what they're set to. These can all be custom set. That's the other thing I should have said. I'll just show you that actually. I'm going to press other. Right, X button config. Press 1. Right, now whatever button I press now, it's going to show me what it does. So let's press this one. Right, that mutes the drone. We'll come back out. Let's press that one. Trompette mute. Auto crank. Volume down. Volume up. So volume up, volume down, auto crank, which is also what that does. And then muting different things. So if we come out, right, what happens if I press that one? Look, oh, look, it mutes the drone. Press it again. What about number 4? Mutes the trompette, unmutes the trompette. See, so you can also mute one of the melody strings if you like. So all these can be set up and saved to do whatever you want from that menu. What happens if you don't like this cable? I'll supply you with this cable, but not this piece. It depends on your type of iPhone or iPad. What if you don't like the cable? What if you don't want the cable? Okay, well, there's another way of doing this. Okay, in that mode, it was drawing its power from the iPad through the cable. So remember, when I supply this, it doesn't have a battery in here. However, if you do put a battery in there, you can run it wirelessly, and you get one of these as well. So we plug that in there first before you turn the power on. How do we turn the power on? Because now if we're going wireless, we need internal power, because we're not drawing power from the iPad, are we? So how do we do that? You use the magic link cable, which I'll give you. So you plug one end in there, and then the other end goes in there. And remember, when you plug it in, it powers up. I don't know if you can see it. It might be glowing slightly blue there. Right, and it's powered itself up, so that's good. So it's running. Now remember, earlier on we saved MIDI out, or MIDI socket I think it was, as our default settings. So that's lit up blue, and it should be trying to pair with this now. You see, now we have no wires plugged in here. Right, so let's have a look. Bluetooth MIDI devices, WIDI master. Actually, it's connected already, so we might hear something if we load a preset. Load a preset, select it, accept. Okay. Oh, yes. Yes. So no wires. Okay. Right. There's one other final way of running this, and that's with the internal audio board. That's optional. You don't have to have that. So we'll turn the power off just for a moment. Okay. We'll unplug that. Now, so you can hear it, I'm going to plug this cable I mentioned earlier into the headphone socket. Give it a clockwise twist as you go. There we are. I'm going to plug the other end into my little speaker. So it's plugged in, so it's turned on. So I'm going to turn on the Gurdy. There we are. Right. Now I need to tell it that my output is the audio socket. So let's look at other options. Secondary output, audio socket. So I'm going to select two. Oh, heard a click then. It takes a few seconds to just get, right, there it goes, it's ready. Load preset, crank on. Oh, I hear sound. Okay, so that works. So in the video of the guy playing at Howell's Way, we were using it in this mode with that speaker. If you want more volume and you're using it with an iPad, what you can of course do is plug this into your speaker or your amplifier, and then this is the way I actually use it. I use the Gurdy wirelessly with the transmitter. Then I have this nearby, and I can just alter all these settings with the sliders, which is a little bit easier than doing it through the menus here. And yeah, and I just have it connected to a speaker because it gives you a bit more bass, because the iPad speaker obviously is a little bit on the tinny side, and that's how I do it. Someone asked me, what can you make it sound like a completely different instrument? Well, the answer is yes, you can. If I change the library, one thing I should mention, this is just turned off. Remember, it's being powered at the moment from the iPad. It said your accessory is using too much power. Now, the reason it said that is I forgot to turn off the internal audio board, so that's sucking power unnecessarily because we're not using the headphone socket at the moment from the iPad. So the way around that is to turn it off, basically. So to do that, you power it back up from the internal battery, or you just plug it into something else like a laptop or anything, just to get some power into it through here, and then you turn off that board. So other options, secondary output. So we don't want audio socket, we want MIDI out socket, remembering that the USB out is always on. Okay, so we don't want the audio socket, so I'm going to select option 1. Right, so that will turn off the audio board basically. So now I can connect it back to my iPad and the iPad will be happier. Right, so powered up again, the iPad's happy. I'm powering it from the iPad. That other lead is just going to my speaker from the headphone socket. Okay, so I was asked, can you simulate other instruments? Yes, you can. So for example, currently, sorry, it's this one here. If I press that, I can change to different things. So if I just press that, right, now if we look now, we're in a different library. We're in the general user soft synth, the default library, and all these strings are set to piano sounds. So what happens if I crank now? Just load a preset. Okay. Oh. So my buzz has now become a piano note. So just to show you that, yes, if you use a different sound font, which confusingly are called wavetables in the BS16i app that we're using, here we are, wavetables. You can see currently we're using this one, library 1, general user soft synth. So there's lots of sound font libraries available on the web, so you can play to your heart's delight with different sounds. The other thing you can do with this app, BS16i, is load preset scenes. So you see here, instead of retuning each of my strings to like a G tuning, if I switch to a G tuning here, what I can do is here, look, you see how they all changed? So we've now got high G melody, low G melody, low C drone. So that was a G C tuning. We've got D with G drone. There we are. High D melody, low G drone, for example. So right, that's just back to where I was. So you can program that in and save them as presets up there for when you change tunings, and you can configure the Digi-Gurdy to alter the scene for you. In one of the menus is a thing called scene control. If you enable that and you've got these saved, and I haven't really got the scope here to go into it in depth, when you change tuning on here, the scenes here will automatically change, and these will automatically change to the right strings. So there's an awful lot you can do if you play around and explore. But just to get going, it doesn't matter. You basically, to start, just plug in the iPad, it powers up, choose the strings you want individually, and there's a separate video on that, and then go and choose the preset tuning that you want and just go. One final thing is, people ask me about painting it. The aim of this project is to apply the most performance for the least price, so I don't add anything to this unless it improves the performance. In terms of painting it, this one has been varnished. I used a polyurethane spray varnish. It's some kind of solvent based, it's not water. And what I find is the main problem with painting gurdys is you block up the key slots and the keys get sticky, so you've got to be really careful. If you've got the time, you can refile all the slots, but what I found is if you take a piece of masking tape, fold it into a U shape, and just put it in here, along here, in a U shape that way, and just stick it along there, and then when you spray, you aim your spray can down at an angle like that, you'll find that the masking tape stops it going into these top key slots, and you paint the tops of your keys. You paint the front reasonably well, and then you can carry on spraying the rest from different angles. The back, again, if you just spray it with one pass, it's okay. It won't gum up the key slots at all, actually. And in terms of the wood, the gurdys I supply, you can see there's two colours here. This wood here is slightly paler than this wood. It'll be this colour, it'll be this type of wood that will be used. But as I say, you can spray them. Obviously you have to mask everything off with masking tape, and just, you know, don't, just light coats, just a few light coats, and it's fine. So I've just done that to protect it on mine.